But Harris, I think, is trying to, as you sort of, as we've spoken before, there's this idea that people don't really know a lot about her. And so the more that she can get out in front of a camera, the better. Obviously, maybe they should have done this earlier, but here we are. But what was really interesting from the town hall is that it was sort of an hour and a bit of sort of sustained questions from, undecided or independent voters. And they were just sort of, again, it was sort of this like light on substance, but heavy like criticism of Trump.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, vote early and vote often. I guess we're not supposed to vote often, but there is a big focus on early voting, and we're starting to see what some of the numbers say. How are the campaigns reacting to what we're looking at so far?
Well, it's interesting because in the past there's been a tradition where Republicans tend, very broad brushstrokes here, but tend to vote on election day, and Democrats tend to vote early. And that tends to be a campaign strategy that is a benefit to Democrats, because if you banked votes early, you know what other doors that you need to knock on that maybe haven't turned out, or you don't know the status of their vote. But since 2020, I think with the pandemic, there's been sort of a wider adoption of early voting methods among Republicans, which, when you think about it, is a little bit at odds with the rhetoric that former President Donald Trump has used to describe early voting or mail-in ballots or absentee ballots.
Particularly mail-in and absentee voting.
Exactly, as a vehicle for fraud and things like that. But we're seeing, people, particularly in those battleground states, not only do Republicans appear to have a voter registration advantage, which is great when you know the complete universe of voters that will be casting ballots, but then also just these early returns are suggesting that Republicans are taking the opportunity to vote early. Speaking to different people, like particularly in the big states that we have the most data when it comes to partisan sort of affiliation is North Carolina. And then speaking to people down there, some of it is a little bit hurricane related, because I think people thought when Hurricane Helene struck the Tar Heel state that maybe it would be a suppressant for voting. But what's happening is that some people are sort of going to vote as just like a little bit of a reprieve from what they're having to deal with their lives, like putting to after the massive damage that happened down there.
Sure.
As well as, I think there's just this election fatigue and people just want to get it over with. And I don't think that's necessarily isolated to North Carolina. I think that's everywhere. But that seems to be things that are driving it. And obviously early voting doesn't really tell us who's going to win.
Right.
But when you compare it to elections past, Republicans are happier, and Democrats have been quieter when I've asked them about how they're feeling about the numbers.
And certainly if people could get out of seeing the ads because they voted early, a lot of people would probably vote early.
That would be amazing technology.
That'd be amazing.
Elon Musk needs to figure that out.
Exactly. We'll get on that. So we've been talking in the past few weeks about the Kamala Harris media blitz, and she's continued with that a little bit. She's done a town hall on CNN. What sort of were the reviews? What were the takeaways for you? Well,
it was interesting. So they hosted this CNN town hall. It was basically sort of instead of a second debate. This was when if there was going to be a second debate between Trump and Harris, that would have been when it would happen.
Right.
And CNN also asked, invited Trump to take part. Trump sort of saying, it's not really in my best interest. I don't see the need to do that. But Harris, I think, is trying to, as you sort of, as we've spoken before, there's this idea that people don't really know a lot about her. And so the more that she can get out in front of a camera, the better. Obviously, maybe they should have done this earlier, but here we are. But what was really interesting from the town hall is that it was sort of an hour and a bit of sort of sustained questions from, undecided or independent voters. And they were just sort of, again, it was sort of this like light on substance, but heavy like criticism of Trump. There were sort of even reviews from the CNN panel straight after the broadcast finished about saying, she didn't close the deal. People, wanted to hear more specifics. Like, for one example, one question was, if you had if you could make one major policy goal through congressional action, what would it be? And she sort of said, there are lots of things that I would like to do. And so not even to be able to articulate like a day one priority, I think was off-putting to some independent voters. But then we sort of, and then I think the most standout sort of feedback was from former the chief strategist of former President Barack Obama's campaigns, David Axelrod, who sort of said, whenever she's a little bit unsure, she kind of ventures into word salad city.
Right.
And I think that is something that, is the danger of when she does do these engagements. But, people need to see that when they're trying to make up their mind between these two candidates. Or not so much between these two candidates, about whether to vote or not, I think.
Right. So there are some people who are going to kind of try to help Harris across the finish line. She's recruited some big names to appear with her. How is the celebrity push going?
Well, I think Democrats have never had a problem with being sort of the cooler party when it comes to Hollywood. We're seeing sort of Obama make his closing pitch. He's going to be joined by Bruce Springsteen, and then you're sort of seeing, that's probably more for the older millennials, but for the younger kids out there that they're trying to engage, the Gen Zs that Kamala Harris says that she loves, we're sort of seeing people like Lizzo and Megan Thee Stallion, but there's also sort of speculation again about Beyonce coming out for her hometown in Houston, but I think people are just sort of holding their breaths after the Democratic National Convention.
Right, because she was the widely rumored special guest that just never really happened.
Eventuated. But this is, Harris's theme song is Freedom, a Beyonce hit, and so I think this is the moment that they, potentially Beyonce could have overshadowed her at the convention, but I think now that they're really needing they're sort of feeling the panic and to get as many people to sort of turn voter enthusiasm to actual votes, they're hoping that someone like Beyonce can help them.
If they really want to troll Trump, they'll have Obama walk out to Born in the USA. Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.